This is Radio Ecoshock with Alex Smith.
Everybody wants to know, how hot will it get? It's global warming, right? But if you just watch temperature, you don't know climate change. Until we all understand the energy disease we made on this planet, we will not stop a catastrophe beyond experience or imagination, and it's rolling right towards us. Strange questions pop up like, why does melting ice slow warming, while snow adds heat? If only a tiny percent of our greenhouse gases actually warm the atmosphere, why are we getting year after year of record heat? Scientists are still finding out. Politicians and business owners don't know. The public has no clue, even as a dangerous shift is underway. Let's look at the most important number. Naturally, we humans want to know the temperature and other signs of global climate change right around us. But as James Hansen explains in his December post, Global Warming Acceleration, the real place determining our future is at the top of the atmosphere. I made a video about that, Global Warming Acceleration. You can check it out at ecoshock.org. But what we're looking at here is not really a place, it's a region, and it's about 100 kilometers or 62 miles above our heads. That is the top of the atmosphere. And that is where tremendous energy from the sun enters our planetary sphere. It's also where Earth leaks energy back into space. Here is what you need to grasp, contained in the very first paragraph of the paper by von Schuckmann's team. Quote, human-induced atmospheric composition changes cause a radiative imbalance at the top of the atmosphere, which is driving global warming. This Earth Energy Imbalance, EEI, is the most critical number, defining the prospects for continued global warming and climate change. Have you heard about EEI in the media? From your friends? Not likely, but Earth Energy Imbalance, EEI, is key to understanding the climate shift. Parts per million of carbon dioxide is important, sure, but that is just part of what makes global warming. The paper, Heat Stored in the Earth System, continues, quote, understanding the heat gain of the Earth system, and particularly how much and where heat is distributed, is fundamental to understanding how this affects warming, the ocean, atmosphere, and land. Rising surface temperature, sea level, and loss of grounded and floating ice, which are fundamental concerns for society, end quote, from that paper. So burn into your brain, EEI means Earth Energy Imbalance. If we don't fix that imbalance, Earth will continue to warm, likely ending this civilization, transforming what lives and what dies. We can lie to ourselves about progress, science, just about everything. The physics on this planet does not care. Now scientists can measure changes in the Earth Energy Imbalance since the 1970s when satellite measurements began. That imbalance is growing bigger at a faster rate with each decade. You must know Earth has a system that is not defined by us. During the last few 100,000 years when modern humans evolved, the climate went through long, slow cycles between very large glaciers and warmer times of expanding tropics. Aside from volcanic powers within the Earth's core and very rare strikes of asteroids, the climate was regulated by the position of the Earth relative to the Sun. During recorded history, there has been a 10,000-year balance of energy flows in from space and out again. We call that the Holocene. That's where we grew up. We broke that with fossil fuels and agriculture, forcing a new age called the Anthropocene, where humans drive the climate. The sun has not changed significantly in that short period of time. The amount of solar energy reaching the Earth remains pretty much the same, despite going through minor cycles of sunspots or no sunspots. What changed? We added a blanket of gases that prevents some of the solar energy bouncing back out into space. We need to know, where does the energy go? If you are running a small business or a household, you need to track money coming in or out. There are all kinds of detailed expenses. You may save some money for later, Or perhaps you are borrowing every month to get by. The planet we live on has an energy budget, and that is what we really need to understand. Scientists try to account for energy using something called the Global Climate Observing System, or GCOS. That was established by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So far, that is just a work plan for world scientists who contribute knowledge to how this Earth economy runs. James Hansen and many other scientists say the key is what happens at the top of the atmosphere. In the September 2020 paper, this team says, quote, "All energy entering or leaving the Earth climate system does so in the form of radiation at the top of the atmosphere, TOA. The difference between incoming solar radiation and outgoing radiation, which is the sum of the reflected shortwave radiation and emitted longwave radiation, that sum determines the net radiative flux at the top of the atmosphere. Changes of this global radiation balance at the top of the atmosphere, the so-called Earth Energy Imbalance, EEI, determine the temporal evolution of Earth's climate. If the imbalance is positive, that is, less energy going out than coming in, energy in the form of heat is accumulated in the Earth system, resulting in global warming, or cooling if the EEI is negative." End quote. Now, I hope you got that, and I will put it in my blog and text as well, and you can look up the original paper with links from my blog. The energy system is not simple, and there are a series of important delays, places to accumulate, and triggers for a later release back into the atmosphere and our lives. In my Canadian province of British Columbia, the government just issued warnings of extreme avalanche risk. There was extra heavy snowfall in the Rocky Mountains. It is accumulated in unstable masses which can rush down the mountain, filling the valley below. It might only take the sound of a single combustion engine on a snowmobile to trigger an avalanche vastly greater than the cause. Scientists want to know if we are in that situation now with climate change. Our September 7, 2020 paper says, quote, "The EEI, remember, Earth Energy Imbalance, is the portion of the forcing that has not yet been responded to. In other words, warming will continue even if atmospheric greenhouse gas amounts are stabilized at today's level, and the EEI defines additional global warming that will occur without further change in forcing." Most of that was based on work by James Hansen in 2005 and in 2017. These scientists find the EEI determines key factors, including the rate of global warming and the amount of warming that would still happen even if we halted all further greenhouse gas pollutions today. We do not stop, as you know, so the Earth energy imbalance grows even greater, which would accelerate warming and produce more warming for a longer time into the future. Recall, the fundamental measurement is not on land or sea, but the EEI at the top of the atmosphere, 63 miles up. Other forces complicate any fixed formula. Within periods measured by decades, the El Niño southern oscillation may add heat or cooling. Slow changes to ocean circulation can modify expectations developed from the Earth energy imbalance at the top of the atmosphere. A number of strong volcanic eruptions could bring a few cooler years. All these forces become noise, pretty easily removed on a long time scale like centuries. It is more difficult to see climate, though, through shorter time scales. Now we are ready for their latest summary of science on where does the energy go. To get the first part, you need to know what watts per meter squared means. In this case, it is a standard way of measuring energy when energy could be either heat or light. Picture a 1-watt light bulb illuminating 1 square meter, or about 10 square feet. The numbers sound small, but do not be fooled. Those small amounts of additional energy are striking every square meter of the whole surface of the planet. It is a globally average number. A change of 1 watt per meter squared over the whole Earth leads to warming significant enough to endanger agriculture, for example. Von Schuckmann and her team say, quote, contemporary estimates of the magnitude of the Earth's energy imbalance range between 0.4 and 0.9 watts per meter squared, depending on the estimate method and the period. And they are directly attributable to increases in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere from human activities, end quote, from von Schuckmann. Other scientists, including James Hansen, say Earth's energy imbalance is significantly higher, with some of it hidden by pollution. I cover that in my piece, Global Warming Acceleration, on Radio Ecoshock, on YouTube, and SoundCloud. In the following quote from the paper, I leave out the citations for each statement, which lead to scientific papers, but the papers led by James Hansen abound. Quote, the majority, about 90% of this positive EEI, is stored in the ocean and can be estimated through the evaluation of ocean heat content. According to previous estimates, a small proportion, 3%, contributes to the melting of Arctic sea ice and land ice, glaciers, the Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets. Another 4% goes into the heating of the land and the atmosphere, end quote. So for me, that is surprising. We're not talking about the total energy arriving from the sun. These percentages are the share of the continual accumulation of energy past the balance point. According to mainstream science, our activities added less than 1 watt per square meter to previous Earth systems. Only 4% of that increase heats the land and the atmosphere. Later in the paper, they find the amount of EEI resulting in atmospheric warming, where we live, is only 1 or 2%. Yet look at the heat waves, the string of the record hottest years, including 2020, violent storms, wildfires, need I go on? That is how fragile the former balance was. The stability depended on polar ice, which exists below 350 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the air. We left the last position of Earth energy balance in 1988. The authors continue with 4 sections on the current status of estimates of heat storage change in the ocean, atmosphere, land, and cryosphere. But I did promise to say something on why snow heats the atmosphere. The authors say, quote, snowfall is the fraction of precipitation that returns originally evaporated water to the surface in a frozen state. In that sense, snow represents a heat transfer from the surface to the atmosphere. It warms the atmosphere through additional latent heat release associated with the freezing of vapor, and snowfall consequently arrives at the surface in an energetic state, lowered by this latent heat. This energetic effort is most obvious over the open ocean, where falling snow requires the same amount of latent heat to be melted again, and thus cools the ocean. That was from Carina von Schuckmann and 37 co-authors, published September 7, 2020. But the impact of heat from snowfall is almost inconsequential compared with other factors, including large amounts of energy used to melt ice from Greenland and Antarctica. As a builder of a geothermal greenhouse, I was interested in their assessment of ground warming and climate history recorded deep underground. In the end, after looking at this paper, I realized yet again we all need to go back to school. You didn't learn this in school, and you won't find it out from the media. Other life forms and impartial physics already began their painful lessons. As the species closest to intelligent life, we have to try to avoid complete climate disaster. And the first step is to understand how the world works, and we all need to learn how to live with nature. This paper, Heat Stored in the Earth System, Where Does the Energy Go?, is open access online. I found it at copernicus.org. Anyone can use this as a tool, as a summary of one large stream of what we know about climate change on this planet. You can also find links to the paper and my quick review as text or audio or this video in my weekly show blog at ecoshock.org. I'm Alex Smith. Thank you for listening and caring about our world.